It's slow. Yeah. It didn't develop enough activity, brain activity. What else can I say, right? All right. So, we did talk about a couple things. We're going to go on right now with the cerebrum. I want you to realize that. The cerebrum is also referred to as the cerebral cortex because of the gray matter. I do want you to realize that. We already said it's about 2 to 4 millimeters thick, the gray matter. We also have billions of cells. Billions and billions of cells. Sounds like Carl Sagan. Did you ever hear him?
Can't say I did.
Carl
Well, before
Sagan,
my time.
he wrote a book about the cosmos. I think it was called The Cosmos. With billions and billions and billions of stars. Anyway, he, I believe he taught at Cornell before he wrote his book. Okay. So one of the things that I want you to realize is that we have these folds. The folds are actually where we're able to squeeze more material into the case. There are 4 lobes to the brain, to the hemispheres. That means that each lobe has a particular areas that it actually coordinates with. I do want you to realize the lobes, most of them are also identified by bones. So when we're looking at the lobes, we actually have 4 lobes, which we actually identify by the sulcus or the fissures. We have the frontal lobe, we have the parietal lobe, we have the temporal lobe, and we have the occipital lobe. Each has its own things. There is a 5th lobe, but it's inside. It's known as an insula.
Insula?
Insula.
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 Yeah, insula. Am I not saying that?
Yeah, I know, but you keep repeating, so I figured maybe there was something kind of missed. The insula is inside. You can't really see it from the outside. The other 4 lobes you see, and then, like I said, they're named related to where the bones are. Okay, those 4 bones. Yes?
Might be a really stupid question.
Go ahead.
Frontal, temporal, occipital, where's the parietal? On the top?
On the top.
I got it.
You didn't remember that? No?
And that's why I was like, oh my god, I
Okay.
really knew that. Like,
Yeah.
where'd it go?
That's all.
Okay.
Okay.
I was quite stupid, sorry.
So when we're looking at the lobes, take a look. The red one is the frontal lobe, the blue one is the parietal lobe, the green one is the occipital lobe, and the pink one is the temporal lobe. Inside you have the insula, which is that yellow one inside, underneath.
Insula.
The other 2. One of the things we actually will notice that on this image, you actually, excuse me, the next image I'm going to show you. This image, you actually have the longitudinal fissure, which actually is where you actually see the division between the 2 hemispheres. You have the yellow line, which is the central sulcus, the orange line, which is the parietal occipital sulcus, and the blue line, which is the lateral sulcus, which is basically how we divide each lobe.
Do those fissures also correspond to the cranial sutures as well?
Yes.
Just that,
somewhat,
like,
somewhat, but
okay.
not exactly always, because they're a little bit off from that.
Oh, okay. I
So
thought just
it
easy way of
varies a little bit.
Oh.
Insula, like I said, is inside. Here's a cadaver brain. That's the insula right there. Okay, you see that they had to cut the temporal and part of the parietal lobe to actually see the insula. Okay. Like we said previously, white matter is myelinated. So basically, in our brain, we're looking at oligodendrocytes that are actually myelinating these neurons. You'll actually see 3 types of fibers: association fibers, commissural fibers, and projection fibers. What's the difference? Whether it's going basically from one portion of the brain to the other on that same hemisphere, which is association. Whether it's going commissural would go across from one hemisphere to the other, which goes generally across at the corpus callosum. And the projection fibers are either going up or down in the
Also,
tracks.
It's just the direction.
The directions, yes. Okay, that's basically it. So if we're looking at this cadaver brain, you see here we actually have projection fibers and commissural fibers. We also have corpus callosum where you actually see commissural fibers.
That's
Okay?
like the inside of the brain, correct?
Yeah. And this is a little dried out, so you can actually see those fibers a little bit better.
Would a
Okay.
sheep brain look like that too?
Yes and no. It's gonna have a larger
Occipital?
Oh, it has a bigger.
cerebellum.
Cerebral.
It has a larger cerebellum relative to the cerebrum. Okay? Remember, we can actually look at an elephant brain.
An elephant brain?
We can look at an elephant brain. It's going to be larger because a lot of people think about human brains are bigger than other brains, but it depends on the size of the body. I want you to realize.
But I heard it was like a size of a two-fist combined.
Yeah, well, it's a little bigger than that.
Oh,
Okay?
never mind.
Yeah, our brains are bigger than that. Okay, I can tell you that.
I don't know.
Okay, one of the schools I used to teach at, they used to have a cadaver brain in the jar as a, representation so that people can understand, in class.
I always wanted to go to that exhibit.
Which one? Bodies?
Oh,
Yeah,
body, that was in the
I actually
Yeah.
really wanted to go.
It's
Oh,
gone.
that's such a shame. Got washed
It's
away.
gone because of, Sandy.
Yeah, a couple of years ago.
Hurricane,
Yeah, it was
Hurricane
years ago,
Sandy
yeah.
blew it out.
2008 when I went, yeah. It was
And
cool.
then-
It was in New York, right?
Yes,
South Street Seaport.
South Street Seaport. But then what also happened was there was a lot of ethical concerns about it because a lot of the people that were there from that particular exhibit were from Chinese prisons. And
Yes.
whether or not they
Oh.
actually gave permission
Permission.
or not.
But remember the one, they had the mother and the.
Yes.
The dad, yeah, you saw the dad leaving inside.
Yeah.
Wait, I really wanted to see it, but it's
Yeah, it's
gone
like
now, right? Like, it's
Well,
not in
here's
here?
the other thing. Here's the other thing. There's also another exhibit that also is a revolving exhibit that goes across different places. That's called, it's Body Worlds, I think it is.
Oh, I gotta look
And
at
that
it.
one is actually put out by a German doctor in a plasticizing technique. And
Oh, is that what it's called, Body World?
I believe it's Body Worlds or Body Works. That was actually interesting enough in the movie, because